But we begin with our big story and the blistering Department of Justice critique on the law enforcement response to the mass shooting in Uvalde that killed 21 people, 19 of them children. This was Attorney General Merrick Garland today in Texas. Take a listen.
Failures in leadership, in tactics, in communications, in training, and in preparedness were made by law enforcement leaders and others responding to the mass shooting at Robb Elementary. As a result, 33 students and 3 of their teachers, many of whom had been shot, were trapped in a room with an active shooter for over an hour as law enforcement officials remained outside.
Just horrifying details. ABC News Chief Justice Correspondent Pierre Thomas is joining me now for more on this. So, Pierre, thank you for being here with us. And first of all, look, the Uvalde County DA put out a statement now saying that the DOJ report should be adequate information for their office to move forward with their investigation. So what is the next step?
Well, that's unclear. We do not know whether the local DA will bring any specific charges. It's a complicated case, as you mentioned, cascading failures up and down, law enforcement officials breaking the protocols that have been put in place for 25 years since the Columbine high school massacre. And that is that you confront the shooter at all costs. You do not wait under any circumstances, and that's precisely what they did here. The report, 600-page report, laying out in graphic detail how the young man appeared at that school that morning and immediately began firing. Police were on the scene within 3 minutes, but for 74 minutes afterward, they refused, did not go inside to confront the shooter, and all those children died as a result.
It's just unimaginable. And, you know, we heard from the AG essentially saying had they followed just generally accepted practices of an active shooter situation, that lives would have been saved. And so, Pierre, I know you touched on this a moment ago, but do you anticipate any criminal charges moving forward, potentially, against law enforcement?
Here's why it's complicated. What are the laws that allow you to prosecute competence? What are the laws that allow you to prosecute bravery or cowardice in this case? That is clearly possible. So we know that there are civil remedies where cities and police departments can be sued for financial culpability in situations like this, but it really will be up to the local prosecutor to see what state laws are on the books that would allow any kind of further prosecution. The Justice Department basically said today that there are really no federal statutes that allow them to prosecute officers for simply not doing their jobs in this case.
And Pierre, President Biden, you know, released a statement saying that policy changes are necessary. So what is the White House considering here?
Well, I think the White House is really falling behind DOJ and really reemphasizing yet again to police departments and local communities the following: that you have to have a plan in place, that you have to do the training for active shooter scenarios. Details like having your local patrolmen having weapons, high-powered weapons in their vehicles so that if something happens, they don't have to wait on other people. They can immediately go in and respond. To have the training processes at the schools where children and faculty know what to do in these scenarios. So, the nation, many thought, had been preparing ever since Columbine. But we see, sadly, in Uvalde that some communities just weren't prepared, and in some cases they did the opposite of what they were supposed to do.
And it wasn't, right, just the response here that is also being critiqued, right, Pierre? I mean, there was so many missteps in regards to communication with the victims' families in the aftermath. I mean, some families were even told that their loved ones had made it when, in fact, they didn't. I mean, how are they adjusting those situations?
Well, again, one of the newer details we learned today was what you're talking about, just how the families were treated, as you said. In some cases told that their children had survived, only to find out later that they had not. In many cases, the DOJ pointed out today that when family members were in fact told that their children had died, they were told by people who were not trained to adequately know how to convey that information and to provide the proper support once the information was conveyed. The DOJ also pointed out that there were days and weeks that went by when some families did not get any kind of emotional, psychological, or other support from local and state officials. So, again, just an abject failure at every level.
It's hard to believe. Pierre Thomas, our thanks to you for your analysis. We appreciate it. I want to bring our big story to our panel now. So joining us today is our ABC News contributor and Sirius XM radio host Mike Muse, along with ABC News contributor and former Republican Congresswoman for Virginia, Barbara Comstock, and President of Next Gen America, Christina Sansoon Ramirez, and ABC News contributor and former San Bernardino Police Chief Jared Bergwan. So thank you all for being here with us. So Jared, let's start here with you. We've talked a lot about the failures here. There's one that I want you to really hone in on. Shortly after the news of this shooting, we kept hearing about the lack of a command center that was even set up there by authorities. And this DOJ report highlights that and the lack of leadership established that day. So explain to us how such a move is made during this deadly mass shooting and how that misstep could have happened.
Well, let's take things in order. When you have an active shooter event, you have the initial response, and training says you go in there and you go after the shooter and you immediately do everything you can to put the shooter down. But there's a piece beyond that that has to do with command and control, managing the scene appropriately, managing the mass response, because you will get a regional response of hundreds and hundreds of officers. They will clog roads. If you have people like that with no mission, then you just end up with people that are in the way. Command and control is about controlling that response, setting up an incident command, giving assignments, making sure that roadways remain clear, making sure that emergency medical people can get in. That did not happen in this case.
It certainly did not, and people died because of it. And Christina, to you, Education Secretary Miguel Cardona attended some of the funerals for some of these Uvalde students just days after the shooting, and went on to say that what happened was so frustrating and that more needs to be done to prevent shootings at schools like this. It is a cry that we hear time and time again in this country. What are the actual conversations happening right now about what should be done?
I mean, I think so much of the conversation and what movement has been done on gun safety has actually been led by families, victims, survivors. Children have called on Congress and state legislatures to act and shown more courage than they have on this issue. So what traction we have seen have come from them. You know, when we talk about the total failure, it's really at every level, at the local level, and especially here in Texas. I live here in Texas. I also attended some of those funerals for the Uvalde families. Our governor praised the response of these officers right after, even though it was very clearly from the beginning almost a total failure. And in Texas, we lead the nation in 2023 in the number of mass shootings, and there hasn't been any movement to implement policies that perhaps would have stopped this shooting, like red flag laws or banning assault-style weapons from being purchased by teenagers. There is so much that was a failure at all levels, all the way up to the governor's office here in Texas.
And Barbara, to you, so many Democratic leaders and Uvalde victim families are saying that federal assault weapons ban is necessary for school shootings like this to stop. Is that something that is truly being considered? Is it possible in this political climate?
Well, I think that's something, again, that they should listen to the families. And I think it was so important to have this report and look at those details. I think certainly the state of Texas did fail these families as well as the local. And so it was very important that this federal report was more dispassionate, removed, looked at all those details. And so now when they look at what needs to be done, they can make recommendations like that. And again, listen to the families. That's in situations like this, I think the political people, members of Congress, have to listen to the families who've been through these things. And I think that's what they're telling them. That's what they need. They want these changes.
And Mike, to you, some of the families have also said in a press conference today that they thank the Attorney General for his commitment to this DOJ investigation, but that they don't need a report to know what happened that day yet. This report goes on to say that a lot of families have indicated, they can't move forward with their lives until they know what really happened to their children. This is a further issue of accountability for some of these families. I mean, they still don't know exactly what happened in there.
Yeah, that's tough to hear, Kana, from the families about that. I think that no report could ever bring their loved ones back, nor could any report, close that wound that is there for the emotional scar that is there with those families. But hopefully this report can serve as a first step to begin that healing process. And as a reminder, before we even start thinking about like gun reform and what that could look like from a federal or congressional level, I think, Kana, for me, this is a reminder for every school district and for every local community out there to practice at a police level what happens during active shootings in different scenarios, whether it's at a school, a grocery store, a mall, a concert venue, or sporting venue. Just as we have in school districts here in New York City, in schools, they do active shooter drills. Sometimes we forget that, we think that this can't happen to us. This can't happen to my community. This can't happen to my school, and then it does. And so this is a reminder for all parties to be more engaged with drills.
Yeah, and I want to point out, Maria Villarreal pointed out today that these families, after this report today, have clarity, but not closure. This is far from over. Mike, Barbara, Christina, and Jared, our thanks to you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.